What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Joe Odyssey Off-Road here. In front of me, we have the 2025 WR250f, which I've had on the channel for about 6 months now, and this bike is awesome. Really, really good. I got 35 hours on it now, 722 miles. So there are some pros and there are some cons to this bike, and I think I've owned it for enough hours to discern whether or not this is a good bike for certain riding conditions over others. And so I'm going to get into the pros and the cons of the bike, what you can expect from it, what you may need to do to make the bike what you want it to be, and what it will never be, depending on your riding style and your riding skills. So start off again, I am 48. I'm fairly new to dirt biking. I've been a sport quad guy my whole life. I've had sport quads. I still have sport quads in the garage. And I've gotten into dirt biking. This was my third dirt bike. I have my fourth dirt bike here already. So we have both bikes on the channel. I've been going back and forth with both of them over the last couple of weeks. And I've been riding for about 11 months dirt bikes now. So the bike, the WR for 2025, just to kind of go over real quick, and this is for US. Overseas, this bike is a little bit different than it is in the US, but here in the US for 2025, you got a map switch now, and you have the communications, the CCU box. So if you want to do fuel tuning and timing changes on the app, on the PowerTune app, which you can use now, but if you want to do fuel or timing changes, you need just the competition ECU, which Yamaha's released. It's $199. That's all you need now for 2025. Previous years, you needed the map switch, you need the CCU, and the computer was like $1,000 worth of stuff. Now you just need the $199 ECU, and you're done. So my bike, for the record, does not have the competition ECU. Moving forward, that would be a mod I would do if the bike remains on the channel, and I'm not 100% sure on that yet. So bone stock, these are the drawbacks. Bone stock, the seat is like the Rock of Gibraltar. It's hard as a rock, and it's very round. The stock seat, it's round to the point where it's about that narrow where you're actually sitting on it, and then when you do sit, it's like it's wedging itself up your rear end and smacking you in the tailbone the whole time you're sitting on it. First ride out, I came home with a sore rear end, and I'm like, this seat is absolutely the first thing that's got to go. So we ordered the Guts racing seat. This is the if you can order the Guts racing seat in the wide foam, and it's not wide in terms of the bike. It makes it as wide as other dirt bikes do. So like, for example, the Husky here, you'll see has about 5 fingers width, full hand width wide seat, kind of, so when you're sitting, you're spreading your weight evenly on the bike, where the stock Yamaha seat does not. I still have it. It's over in that corner there. But this seat now is like what the Husky seat is. So it's nice and flat across the top. And I ordered it in the soft foam, so it's really soft. The stock foam is very hard, besides being narrow. So that was the first thing that had to go. And if you're into any type of comfort, people are going to tell you, oh, stand up all the time. You don't need to use the seat. But those people are obviously not trail riding. They're just, racing or riding really aggressively. If you want to just go out and trail ride and cruise some long dirt roads even, or anything like that, you're going to want to sit down. And you're not going to be comfortable on a stock seat, I can promise you. So you're going to need to invest in a seat. The Guts racing seat with the single cover, if you don't do the custom designed one with the ribs, the non-ribbed one, this is about $225 seat. Comes with the material to recover the fuel cap, and you'll see I did it nice and neat. Stapled it over the stock cover so I could always reverse it if I wanted to, and I put a washer there under the pin, so when you take it off and on, it spins and doesn't bind up your the material. So looks factory, really good seat. Second issue with this bike is it's almost 38 inches tall. Even with lowering it 11 millimeters, or however much they lowered it, versus the YZ250F, The YZ250FX is the same height as this, for reference. But if the YZ250F is about 3/4 of an inch taller even than this bike. But even this bike stock, with it being lower than the motocross bike, it's still significantly taller. Even though it's weird, even though it's advertised the same height as the Husky there, the Husky sits about a 1/2 inch lower stock. So that you may think a 1/2 inch is not going to make a huge difference, but when you swing your leg over the bike and then you sit on it, and by the time it sags and all that stuff, as soon as you make a little turn and you lean the bike a little bit, that 1/2 inch makes a huge difference. And you dab in your foot a little bit in a turn, or over a rough section, or to correct yourself, versus not being able to dab your feet, or coming to a stop in like some uneven terrain, and you're not a tall guy and you can't put your foot down cleanly, where like you have to slide your rear end off in order to put your foot down. That's going to make for you tipping the bike over quite a few times. So since I've added a lowering link and have the softer foam seat on there, I have no issues now in terms of rider confidence and being able to dab my feet. And for reference, I am 167 pounds and I'm about 5'6", about like a 29-inch inseam. So if you're taller than me, or your inseam is, a couple inches, you may not have a problem. I was just sitting on one and seeing, but that's been my experience, and a lot of short people like myself complain about the same issue with this bike. They're just very tall. So for general trail riding, it's going to be a little bit tall. Lowering it, no big deal. You can take it to a suspension guy too, have them internally lower the forks in the shock, like a full inch all around, or 1.5 inches all around, and that will also greatly reduce the ride height. If you're concerned about doing it the way I did with the lowering link, I have a full review on that where I took it out for a ride, and I've ridden it several times since. There was zero ill effect. I cannot discern a difference between the bike being stock and versus with the lowering link. So it does not adversely affect the handling at all. It's actually just going to increase your confidence quite a bit, and your handling is going to improve because you're going to be able to ride the bike with more confidence and more comfortable. So another negative about this bike stock, and then we'll get into the positives, because there's a ton of positives, only really a few negatives. The other negative of this bike is the throttle off idle is very jerky. So, and that's just a characteristic of a lot of 4-stroke performance-oriented bikes, particularly the Japanese ones. When you first touch the throttle, it's very on-off hard. Like you're gonna feel like you're jerking around a lot. Like there's no smoothness when the throttle first engages. To me, I describe it as the throttle going from, say, 0 to like 5 or 7%. There's no like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%. It just goes from 0 to 7. What I did to alleviate, I would say 70% of that is I got a G2 throttle tamer tube. You'll see it in there, the red. And then I put some ODI grips on top of that. But the G2 throttle tamer tube has a different cam design on the end, and it changes the way the throttle rolls on. Like the first third of the throttle is going to be much less aggressive. So if you want full power, you got to really jam the throttle. But if you just want a trail ride, or if you want to navigate through some tighter stuff, go slower, that's a must. It transforms the bike a lot. It's not 100% gone, however. So I think getting a competition ECU and doing some fuel tuning at the bottom end, taking some timing out at the initial throttle input and adding some fuel there will alleviate the balance of it. And maybe we'll find that out in the future. We'll see. So just keep that in mind. So if you're a newbie, the bike could feel a little bit aggressive. Also, while they have softened the suspension tuning a little bit for 2025, I will say it's still tuned and sprung rather stiff. If you're a heavier guy, maybe 200 pounds, 210 pounds, this may be perfect. But for me, and they say the bike is sprung for a 160 to 185 pound rider. I'll be honest, I'm 167. By the time I put my gear on, carry a bag with some water, tool pack, probably about 175. the bike in standard settings is very stiff for any slow type of riding. If you're going fast, we'll get into that in the positives, no problems. But if you're going slow, you're going to pick your way through trails and putt around, you're going to find the suspension rather stiff. I have the rear shock at standard settings right now, and I have the forks, the compression on the forks out to standard setting is 11 clicks out from full in. I have it at 15 out from full in. It helps quite a bit, but it's still rather stiff in the slow stuff. I may do a test in the future just for shits and giggles, kind of like completely open the compression on the shock and the fork and then speed up the rebound on both and see if that makes a big difference. Because even with the clickers out on those forks at 15, I've never come close to bottoming out those forks on a hard hit. So there's quite a bit of stiff valving going on there in the forks. The shock too, I would say. So that's something that's a negative. Now let's get into the positives. There's a lot of positives. Some of the positives are going to be things I mentioned in the negatives. So we'll start with the suspension since we've already talked about that. The positive of the suspension is it's high quality KYB stuff. Any suspension shop can tune a KYB fork. Their parts are easy to come by. They're easy to work on. You can watch a couple of videos in your garage and do it in your garage if you have the right tools. And if like you just want to do a spring swap or change the oil, stuff like that, it's stuff that you could do at home if you do a little research and learn about it. They're easy to work on. And suspension tuners love working on KYB stuff because the quality of the parts they use in the KYB suspension is top notch. And Yamaha has a proprietary KYB fork design. I think they call it the SSS fork, and it's basically like it's got something to do with the valving. There's like a variable valving stack in there, which changes the characteristics depending on how you ride it. That's that. All that said, obviously it's still a little bit stiff, but you're going to find that this bike is very easy to ride over the speed in which your ability allows you, or you should be riding, let's just say. So if you find you're going way faster than you should be, the suspension, the forks particularly on this bike are going to really keep you safe, because if you find yourself you're going a little bit too fast and you're like, uh-oh, like, I'm going to hit this here coming up, this rut or this water bar, and I'm going way too fast than I should be, you're not going to have too many oh shit moments with the suspension, because in those circumstances, because it just swallows that stuff up. Like you do not even feel it, and it won't bottom out. It won't send you flying. It just eats it and keeps going. So in that regard, the suspension is phenomenal. If you like to ride fast and aggressive, you're going to love the suspension on this bike, because that is really what it's tuned for. It's not tuned for slow pace, technical enduro stuff. Another really good thing about this bike is it comes with a lot of bells and whistles. I'd venture to say for the price point at $9,099, plus obviously destination charge, so let's say $9,700, let's call it. There's no bike on the market that competes with this in terms of price point. If you want a comparable Husky 250F or KTM 250F or a 350, those bikes are significantly more money. You're talking $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 bikes. With this bike too, you get the headlight, you get the tail light, you get a radiator fan stock. It comes with everything you need to get out in the trail and go. Okay. Other than the modifications that I've done, which is just strictly because I'm short and I wanted a little more comfort, the bike's ready to go out of the box to ride without having to worry about, like, I live here in Arizona, hot climate. Oh, I need a radiator fan. I don't have to add one. It's already got it. On a 4-stroke, it's more important than on a 2-stroke having a radiator fan, because 4-strokes do tend to run hotter than 2-strokes do. So just keep that in mind. I would say another positive is the tire selection. Some people will argue that. I know it's preference and depends on where you ride, but for here in the desert, this has the MX33 in the rear and in the front. The Husky also comes with the MX33 in the front, so it's obviously a good tire choice for the fronts, because even the Enduro Austrian bikes are using the same tire in the front. They put a different tire in the back though. But this has an MX tire in the back. It's the MX33. I think it's the same tire that comes on the motocross bike. But for out here in the desert, honestly, it's done really well. It wears good. Desert conditions here can be brutal and tear up tires. And these tires are a little bit stiffer than, say, like the AT81, like that's on that. And so that's a downside, but you can run a little bit lower air pressure in this tire because it's so stiff. I run about 10 or 11 in the rear of this with stock tubes and have had no issues. And it's wearing really good. You'll see with 35 hours on, it's got plenty of tread, you know, over the thickness of my thumb still on there. So it's got plenty of life left in it. So I think that's a plus, but obviously that's going to be something that, you know, depends on your riding conditions and where you ride, and, you know, tire choice is obviously a lot of preference. So I'm sure there's definitely better tires out there, but for out of the box, the tires do well. Here's a big positive for me on this bike. Aside from is the tuning of it. So the fuel tuning, the mapping. Aside from the initial on-off throttle, when you're rolling, this bike seems to be tuned dynamite out of the box. So for reference, I've owned many other vehicles, many other ATVs. I've owned a few other dirt bikes. And the tuning is either typically very lean from the factory on most units. I don't feel that, and obviously I haven't put a, you know, AFR gauge in the tailpipe to, you know, sniffer to see what the air fuel ratio is, but just seat of the pants and feeling how the bike runs, and from my knowledge of riding many different ATVs and other bikes and stuff, the bike runs mint. It doesn't seem to be lean at all. There's zero heat that comes off that I feel off the bike. It doesn't get hot. The fan barely kicks on. That tells me the bike's tuned really well. The other thing that tells me this bike is tuned really well is it does not flame out. There is no flame out on this bike. Like, I've gotten in, you know, conditions in trail rides where it starts getting gnarly. You're in a higher gear, slow down, making a turn in too high a gear, got to go up a hill, grab a quick one-click downshift. Maybe you should have downshifted 2 gears instead of 1, and it just lugging to the point where it sounds like it should stall, and it doesn't. It just keeps like blah, 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 going, and you just give it a fistful of throttle and just pull out. And if you want to ride this bike up a gear, it's really it doesn't. There's no flame out issues. It's great, and I think that's an aspect of how they have it tuned. It's tuned well, and this bike is uncorked. So if you don't know, a WR comes corked up. It comes with a corked up airbox. There's like a snorkel, like block off thing in the airbox that you have to take out when you get. You don't have to, but I did to get it to breathe better. And then it comes with a big restrictor in the tailpipe, and you'll see how black sooty that is on a stock bike. And so it comes with a restrictor and a tailpipe that's skinnier than your pinky. Like, you can't even get your pinky in it. So I took all that stuff out, and the bike runs mint. I think they tune it for it being out, and they put that stuff in knowing everybody's taking it out in the first place. So, as opposed to some other bikes on the market that have all this emission stuff on it from the factory, and, you know, as soon as you start taking that stuff off, the bikes run too lean, and it's probably running lean before that. This bike's the opposite. It's tuned really, really well from the factory. I'm very impressed with that. So that may be why I don't believe this is a California green sticker bike. I don't think you can get this bike in California. So that's probably why it's not affected by that California emissions. They just tuned it to run good everywhere else and be legal everywhere else. So it runs really, really strong. Also, real quick too, guys, I forgot. I wanted to interject this. When I was editing, I realized I didn't mention the fuel mileage on the bike. It has a 2-gallon fuel tank, and like, for example, I did 60 miles. The last ride video you've seen on this bike from Easter weekend, I did 60 miles on the button, like from my driveway to the time I pulled back in my driveway. I hit 60 miles on the dot. it used barely over a gallon of fuel. So, I mean, I'm averaging, even riding aggressively, I get about 45 miles out of a gallon. So you're going to get, at minimum, 80 miles out of a tank of gas and upwards of 100 miles per tank of gas. So in that regard, it's awesome. Another positive for me is the air intake placement. This could be a negative for some people, so I could have added this to the negative list too. This is one of those things that's depending on you. The negative of the airbox location here, so if you don't know the airbox on these newer Yamahas, they're all, it's up top, it's up high here, as opposed to other bikes where it's down low on the bottom, and you don't hear any air noise, you don't hear the intake. The bike's quieter when you ride it. And this bike here, if you watch any of my riding videos, you'll hear where it sound, when I'm getting on it, on the throttle, it almost sounds like a loud exhaust. It's really just the airbox, it's the air intake noise. This gives you that real like throaty sound. At a certain RPM, if you're just cruising, you may have to either change your RPM or shift the gear. Because at a really, really low RPM, say you lug in 6th gear at like 50, you can hear that air intake noise. It's loud. With the helmet on, it doesn't bother me too much, but it is noticeable, and that may bother some people who like just really quiet and not hearing the bike run. I'd rather have some of that than hearing the motor. Some of the motors on dirt bikes and ATVs are kind of clattery and all that stuff. I like the exhaust and air intake noises better than that, so it drowns that stuff out. So that's not really a negative for me per se, but it can be a negative for some if you're noise sensitive. The positive of the airbox being up here is the filter hardly gets dirty unless you're riding behind a bunch of people and a lot of dust. If you're riding solo a lot, you almost never need to change your air filter or clean your air filter because it stays clean for a long time because it's way up high out of the dust from the rear tire kicking up dust. On a traditional dirt bike, where the airbox is down there, like in the Husky, that bike's got 4.5 hours on it, and the air filter's already dirty. I gotta swap it out or clean it. Whereas this bike, I can go 15 hours or more, and the air filter still looks pretty good. And I'm just at that point, I just clean it just to clean it, but it stays fairly clean for longer because it's up high out of the dust, as opposed to being down low. Also, too, if you are doing some trail riding and exploring, and if you find yourself in a situation where you got to cross some water and it ends up being higher than you thought it would be, you don't really have as much of a risk of swamping the bike because the air intake's so high on it. So, not that you should be riding a dirt bike through, a river, but shit happens. You're on the trail, and you're going somewhere, and you got to cross a little bit of water, and ends up being a hole. You end up getting deeper than you want it to be, or you thought it would be, and it happens. It can happen out there. So that's a nice design there in that regard. Another nice thing is the skid plate. I know this is controversial. Some people change the skid plate right away. They say stock skid plate's junk. I'm gonna have to strongly disagree with those people. I think the stock skid plate on the Yamaha is very good, and it's because it's not a hard, rigid, brittle plastic. You see how pliable this is, and it's very thick. So it'll take a hit and it won't crack. It'll just stay. It'll be a little flexible and bounce off stuff. And you'll see it's got a little pitting from the tire, but aside from that, it's in mint condition. It comes up nice and high in the front because on the Yamahas, the radiator hose comes down the bottom there to the water pump, so it protects your water pump. Some of the aftermarket skid plates don't have that, and I don't know why somebody would go to an aftermarket skid plate that has less protection just to cover their linkage, and you're leaving your vulnerable radiator hose and water pump exposed. That, to me, is way more vulnerable than your linkages. You can always add a linkage guard separate to the factory skid plate. That's what I would do. I think stock skid plate, there's no need to waste your money. It works just fine. So that's my opinion. Things that you'll see on the bike besides the seat that I added, they don't come with. There's no frame guard, so I added those. You're going to want to get those because you're going to want to add a little bit more grip to hold the bike with your ankles. You'll see the boot rub I got there on that one. Otherwise, the frame is like this all the way down, as opposed to like a Husky or KTM that comes with some frame guards with some texture on them. Not the best. It's kind of like just stippled plastic. So we'll probably add some Acerbis rubber ones on here too. But you're going to need those. And then I added hand guards. The bike does not come with hand guards, not even flag style. I think that's a That's one thing Yamaha should include on the bike. I understand they're selling the bike for a lot less than the competition is, but they do label it as an enduro bike or even a trail bike. I think they should all come with some at least flag style handguards, because you're going down the trails. If you're riding single track tight trails in the woods, you can have some branches hit and smack your hands, or protect some roost from your friends in front of you. Or for me, I'm riding in some double wide trails, and if I'm on the right side or the left side of the trail, the stuff sticking out from the sides has thorns on it. I'm out here in the desert, so you need some type of handguard to protect your hands. I think that's something they should include. They're not that expensive. Even if you want to sell the bike for an extra $50, it's still significantly cheaper than other bikes on the market. And you'll have some handguards to start, the GYTR flag style or full wraps. That's about it in terms of that. Those are just the things I added for personal preference. Maybe you don't use handguards. I think handguards is a necessity if you're out trail riding. In terms of gearing, stuff like that, maintenance, the drivetrain, I guess we'll summarize it as. Drivetrain is awesome. I think bike fires right up. I have not had any, I can't say any. I think it's happened to me once or twice where stalled the bike. It wasn't a flame out, but I stalled it, turning around, just stalled it from a stop. And go to fire it back up, and past years, the bike will just crank. It doesn't want to fire back up when hot. I've experienced that particular symptom one time, maybe twice. I would only say one time, because the second time I'm thinking of, it just took an extra second or two to start. I only had one time where I went to start it and it was just cranking. And I put it in neutral, and then I fired up instantly. That seems to alleviate the issue for people in past years. If you start the bike up in neutral, it fires right up. But when you go to start it in gear, even with the clutch in, it does have the tendency to not want to start when hot if you stalled it and then go to start it back up again. I don't think it's as much of a problem. I think they've changed the tuning a little bit maybe to help with that. I haven't noticed it much on this bike. But that being said, I haven't really stalled the bike much either. So that hasn't been a problem. As we already mentioned, it doesn't flame out at all. So, and I don't really put myself in enough situation where I can stall the bike. I had one instance where I stalled it. I was coming up on a bit of a hill climb. At the top, there's a rocky ridge. Didn't know what was on the other side. My buddy Scott stopped on it to kind of look down and then decide. And I was coming up right behind him, and I had to kind of pull off to the side of him. And then got to the right of it. It stalled out before I was able to grab the clutch and pull it in and stop myself. But then I just pulled the clutch in, fired it right back up, and went down. Bike fired right up for me. So could it still be an issue? Maybe. Like I said, it did happen to me one time, but it hasn't been a regular pronounced thing that I've noticed and said, this is a problem. So in terms of the gearing is awesome. 1st through 3 is pretty close gearing. 4th starts to spread out a little bit more, and 5th. 6th gear is just, you're never going to use 6th unless you're on a long dirt road connecting trails and you want to cruise that's 55 miles an hour and just pop it up in 6th and just keep the RPMs down. That's what 6th gear is for. Otherwise, you won't ever use it. But 1st through 3rd is very tight, very close ratio. 4th is close too, but it starts spreading out a little more. 5th is really up there. If I'm riding fast on the trails, I'm primarily in 4th gear. Slower trails, 3rd gear, I would say I'm in. And then with that, in 3rd gear, you're going decently slow on trail. You can kind of lug it down really good and then give it some more throttle, pull out. Doesn't have a ton of low-end torque on the bike, but it's got a lot of horsepower in a higher RPM range. But it doesn't flame out much, so you can still kind of lug it without having to worry about stall it, and then give it a bunch of throttle, and the motor spins up fast enough where it'll just pull itself out real quick. So it's nice in that regard. You don't have the low end torque of a 350 4-stroke or a 450, but it's very manageable because of the way it's tuned, I think, in terms of not stalling at the bottom and being able to lug it. So I found that a nice quality about the bike too. Brakes are terrific. The Nissan brakes that come on this bike are awesome. They got a great feel, awesome stopping power, no complaints with that. So to summarize, am I happy with the bike and who would I recommend the bike for? I'm very happy with the bike and its overall performance. I think long term, if I keep it and have a 4-stroke and a 2-stroke on the channel, I will definitely soften the suspension. And then when I have the suspension softened, I will have them lower the whole bike internally like an inch. And then I'll get rid of the lowering link and put the stock link back on, and then just have them lower the whole bike in the suspension. Because at that point, I'll already be in the suspension anyway, changing the valving and everything at the suspension shop. So it's not going to be no extra for them to lower it for me. So that would be a good time to do that. I think that would be a mod to do. Also, I would do the competition ECU and see if we can get it tuned a little bit more. Like, you know, you have the map switch. You can still have a really hot map where it's fire breathing, and then you can have map 2 set at where you are going slow and tight stuff, and really take all the timing out of the bottom, add a bunch of fuel, and make it really luggy at the bottom, and hopefully take away the remaining characteristic of the on-off throttle feeling. So that, and then we'll do like an FMF slip-on. And I think that would complement the bike tremendously. Between that and the suspension tuning, I think that's all this bike needs for me. And it would be a very good all-around bike. As it stands out of the box, suspension is too stiff for slow, rocky stuff, particularly. Going slow is fine, but if you're going slow and picking your way through rocks, the suspension just doesn't take those slow hits with the rocks. Like this doesn't travel up nice and, you know, with that. It's kind of just going to bounce over them because the suspension's valve stiffer there. So that's what makes this bike for me when it gets slower and in rocky situations a little bit of a handful and sketchy, because I just don't, the compliance isn't quite there, and I'm not good enough of a rider to overcompensate that. So that's that. So in terms of who the bike would be good for, I think if you're a brand new to dirt bikes, you've never had a dirt bike before, and you don't have no experience riding a motorcycle at all, this is not the first bike for you, because it is an aggressive, more aggressive bike. This is not a easygoing trail bike. This is a bike that's meant to ride hard and fast, that can go slow, but it's more designed for a faster paced riding style. And I think the stiffer settings and the twitchy hot throttle for a newbie is just, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Start off on something like a air-cooled trail bike or a KLX 300, something really, really docile. In terms of who the bike would be good for, I think the bike is perfect for an experienced rider, somebody who wants a aggressive bike, but not all the power of a 450, but something that's rev monster. It'll rev out, like, it seems like it's got an endless rev limit. It just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. It doesn't have a power band where it hits peak and then falls off real quick. It just, once it hits its peak power, it feels like it keeps carrying it for an endless amount of RPMs. Like, it just keeps on going. Like, the RPMs just keep climbing until you shift. And then in terms of like suspension, if you're riding fast and aggressive, the suspension is set up for that already. So if you're a fast aggressive rider and you're an experienced rider, this bike is definitely awesome. Especially if you're smaller and a smaller guy, aside from the height being a disadvantage, but if you're a smaller, like being light, maybe you're tall, skinny guy, you're light though, you don't really need that 450 power. And quite honestly, in a trail setting, 450s are really too much of a bike. Unless you're a really, really big guy, you're doing a lot of open desert stuff. If you're doing mostly trail riding, you don't almost never need the power of a 450. So I think the bike's awesome for that. So if you're a newbie, just be cautious. If you insist on buying the bike, leave it corked up when you get it. Learn how to ride the bike like that. Get the G2 throttle tamer. Really be careful learning it. Then as you get more confidence, uncork the bike, take the throttle stop out, take the air intake thing out, and take the exhaust thing out. It'll open the bike up a ton. Make it like a YZ250FX. And then if you want to, you know, kind of go row with the bike from there. But the bike is rather aggressive for somebody with zero experience riding dirt bikes, so I would not recommend it for that person. So maybe you're the exception to the rule, but get yourself a cheaper bike, $5,000, $6,000 KLX 300R or 230 or CRF 250F. Learn how to ride on that for a while before moving into something that's aggressive, and spending 10 grand on something that you may hop on and say, be intimidated by, to be quite honest. So that's it for this one, guys. Terrific all-around bike for anybody with experience. I mean, it does really a lot well. It's got a few downsides we've talked about, but overall, there's no perfect bike. You're never going to get one bike that's going to do everything perfectly. And if your budget is, you can only have one bike, you're going to have to choose. Quite honestly, if your budget is only for one bike, I think the two bikes I have are the perfect bikes. I would throw also in the mix the Austrian 350 bikes, particularly like the emission controlled ones, like the FE 350W, say, like my friend Scott had. They're tuned a little bit leaner and the power is dialed down a little bit, so you have about like 35, 36 horsepower, about same as this, but you get a little bit more torque. The bike is just significantly more expensive, and they don't make them anymore in 2025. You only get a 350 in 2025. They're the hotter cross-country version bikes, or the S, which is the dual sport ones, which is kind of a bummer. But that's it for this one, guys. 2025 WR250f. Terrific all-around bike. Can do anything you ask it to. You're just going to have a little bit more of a difficult time in the slower stuff, technical stuff, and the suspension is going to be a little bit stiff there. Other than that, awesome. Highly recommend it. It's a Yamaha. It's built like a tank. It's stout. It's going to last and run probably forever. Maintenance, I know I forgot to touch on that, but maintenance is very simple. I told you the air filter stays fairly clean. Keep your chain lube. That's any bike. And change the oil on this bike. It doesn't take a full quart even. It takes about 0.85 quarts of oil. So I change it every 10 hours. Keep the oil clean, and this motor will last you forever. Clean air, clean oil, WR250F. You have many thousands of miles of happy ownership. So that's it for this one, guys. Joe at Odyssey Off-Road. Stay tuned to the channel for more. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like the channel, if you like what you see here, you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing. It helps me out a ton. And then smash that like button if you like the video. We'll see you guys on the next one.